Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
May 8th, 1994. Portsmouth against West Bromwich Albion. A final day of the season that carried weight far beyond a single football match. For West Brom, it was survival. A win would guarantee safety and, depending on other results, would drag rivals Birmingham City into danger. For Portsmouth, there was nothing left in terms of league stakes, but the stage they were about to provide would become the story in itself. What followed was not just remembered as a game, but as one of the most extraordinary away followings and most chaotic football weekends of the 1990s. It began before most people had even realised what was coming. The night before the match in Southsea and Portsmouth was already alive with travelling supporters. Pubs were full early, streets packed, and according to multiple accounts, trouble had already broken out long before kick-off day had arrived. Some described fighting through the night. Others spoke of a constant tension in the air as West Brom supporters began to arrive in numbers that Portsmouth simply had not prepared for. There were already whispers that the scale of the travelling support was far beyond anything the city had expected. By the morning of the game, Portsmouth was already changing. Coaches and cars streamed into the city from early hours. Supporters arriving at 8 a.m. described standing back and watching the sheer volume of people pouring in, slowly realising this was not going to be an ordinary away day. One West Brom fan remembered getting there early, only for it to take hours before the scale fully registered, saying it only hit him when stewards began moving home supporters out of their own areas just to accommodate the growing numbers of Albion fans. Another described the heat of the day, the sun already strong, fans in painted colours, and the sense that something unusual was building. Fratton Park itself quickly became overwhelmed. What was expected to be a controlled allocation turned into something very different. Multiple accounts suggest there was no proper all-ticket restriction for West Brom supporters, and as a result, thousands more travelled than anticipated. Estimates vary wildly depending on who is telling the story. Some say around 8,000, others insist it was closer to 10,000 or even 12,000 inside the ground, with many more outside in the city. Whatever the exact figure, what is consistent across every account is the same idea. West Brom fans were everywhere. The queues outside the stadium became part of the story itself. One supporter described arriving early and standing near the front, only to return briefly and find the line had stretched into something almost unbelievable, snaking around the stadium and up surrounding streets. Others spoke of 3-hour waits in baking heat, of sunburnt necks, of face paint melting and running down faces as the day grew hotter. Some even joked that the queues themselves felt longer than the journey to Portsmouth. Inside Fratton Park, the situation was even more striking. The Milton End, large sections of the North Terrace, and parts of the South Stand were all flooded with West Brom supporters. One Portsmouth fan admitted that as a teenager, he went onto the North Terrace expecting to stand in his usual place, only to find himself completely surrounded by Albion fans. Another recalled that he had never seen anything like it at Fratton Park, describing it as the biggest away following he had ever witnessed, with supporters everywhere he looked. The segregation inside the ground was fragile from the start. A thin line of police tape was used in parts of the North Terrace to separate home and away fans, but multiple witnesses describe it as almost symbolic rather than functional. One supporter remembered looking at it and immediately knowing it would not last. Others described it being breached within seconds of the game starting, with police struggling to maintain any real separation as the stands filled beyond capacity. Some even joked later that it was referred to as a tape of impregnability, a sarcastic reference to how quickly it failed once pressure built. As the stands filled, the atmosphere grew more intense but also strangely communal at times. One Portsmouth fan recalled initially feeling uneasy, but then surprised that large parts of the day were not purely hostile. He remembered fighting breaking out in pockets, particularly around kick-off and again when the goal was scored, but also long stretches where both sets of supporters simply absorbed the occasion unfolding around them. Another home supporter, who was just a teenager at the time, described the noise of boing and Go West Bromwich Albion echoing around Fratton Park as something that stayed with him for years afterwards. Outside the ground, the city itself had effectively been taken over. Pubs were full from early morning. One West Brom supporter described arriving in Portsmouth and immediately heading into a pub already packed with Albion fans, the atmosphere loud, friendly and chaotic in equal measure. Another recalled seeing a programme seller outside the away end, a Portsmouth fan proudly wearing his scarf, who was met with the inevitable chant of "Who ate all the pies?", only to take it in good humour and play along, laughing and wobbling his stomach to the amusement of the crowd. Small moments like this were repeated across the day, creating a strange blend of humour and tension. There were also more volatile memories. Some supporters spoke of clashes in and around Southsea the night before, with fighting breaking out in pubs and on the streets. Others described a constant police presence throughout the weekend, escorting groups, separating crowds, and struggling to keep pace with the sheer number of people arriving. One account from someone based in the Royal Navy at the time simply summed it up as total carnage all weekend, suggesting that what happened on match day was only part of a much larger surge of activity across the city. Back at Fratton Park, the match itself became almost secondary to everything happening around it. Portsmouth fans recalled trying to focus on the game, but constantly being distracted by the scale of the away support and the noise coming from all sections of the ground. One supporter described how, even 10 minutes into the match, West Brom fans were still pouring in, being directed into different areas as stewards tried desperately to manage space that simply was not there. The football, however, carried its own tension. West Brom needed the result. Every update from elsewhere added pressure. Then, just before half-time, the decisive moment arrived. Ian Hamilton delivered a cross to the far post, and Lee Ashcroft rose above his marker to head the ball into the net. In that instant, everything shifted. West Brom supporters believed survival was secured, while Portsmouth fans watched the atmosphere transform again inside the ground. What made the moment even more surreal for many was what happened shortly before it. Several witnesses independently recalled a strange occurrence where referee David Elleray appeared to blow for half-time early, around 5 minutes ahead of schedule, adding confusion and frustration to an already tense match. Whether understood correctly by all in the moment or not, it became one of those details that supporters still talk about decades later as part of the day's odd atmosphere. As the game moved into the second half, tensions remained high. Portsmouth still competed, and there were chances, including a double save from Tony Lang, that prevented further damage, but the focus for many inside the stadium was already shifting towards what was going to happen at full time. News filtering in that Birmingham city were losing elsewhere only intensified the emotion among West Brom supporters, who could sense survival was edging closer. By the time the final whistle eventually came, the reaction was immediate. Thousands of West Brom fans surged forward, pouring onto the pitch in celebration. One Portsmouth supporter remembered the sheer scale of it, describing the Milton End and surrounding areas as being completely filled with celebrating away fans, while home supporters looked on in disbelief. Another recalled that even sections of the north and south stands had effectively been taken over, with the pitch quickly becoming a sea of green and yellow. From a Portsmouth perspective, it was overwhelming. One fan described finding himself surrounded by West Brom supporters after initially standing in his usual place, while others spoke of confusion, tension, and in some cases, minor clashes as emotions spilled over. But alongside that, there were also unexpected moments of shared celebration and respect, with some supporters recalling West Brom fans and Portsmouth fans interacting on the pitch once the initial surge of chaos had settled. For West Brom supporters, it was the culmination of everything that had built up over the weekend. The travel, the numbers, the tension, the goal, the result elsewhere, all feeding into a release that many described as unforgettable. Some ran across the pitch. Others simply stood in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. One supporter even described a moment where a fellow fan on crutches somehow ended up swinging them around in the middle of the celebration, capturing the surreal energy of the day. And as the celebrations continued, the scale of what had happened in Portsmouth that weekend began to settle in. Not just a match, but a full city experience. A weekend where thousands of supporters arrived, overwhelmed expectations, filled every available space, and left behind stories that would be retold for decades. This channel is all about football lads sharing stories, remembering memories that mean something to us all. Football lads give me stories. And sometimes I use them in my videos, but sometimes they are not entirely true, and I get hammered on here for this. But I can only put out stories that I have been given. If you have any good away day stories, or would like us to make a video about a specific football mob or terrace character, then reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook. Just type in everything casual on there and my page will pop up. Feel free to message me on there. All I want to do is create a community where we can share memories of the good times and create original content. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you are into the football casual culture and you enjoy watching stories like this, then click like and subscribe. That way you will be notified when we put out a new video, which is usually every week. You are also playing your part in helping our channel grow. So, honestly, thank you. See you next time.